Let's bring in now senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, who is here, senior political analyst David Gergen, legal analyst Laura Coates, and senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson, and then we can get more on this reporting. So as we all digest this, and we're going to keep Matthew as well. What's interesting is that there's so much exposure, Nia Malika Henderson, to the White House, and you have this new reporting by Matthew, and then this all that he notified the transition team, right? And the Vice President, Mike Pence, in charge of the transition team.
Yeah, and who else is on that transition team? Steve Bannon is on that transition team. Donald Trump's 3 oldest kids also on that transition team. And the transition team, of course, in charge of vetting and in charge of trying to get the government up and running, and so that the president will be ready on day one, so he can be surrounded by good people and informed as to what's going on in all the hot spots, and, both domestically and internationally. And the fact that either the warning didn't get up to Donald Trump or he didn't heed the warning. The fact that his children who are on that transition committee and Steve Bannon, who knows what they did? I mean, that's the thing. We really don't know. And again, we just don't know why Donald Trump can't seem to quit Michael Flynn, right? At every point, there are these warnings about Michael Flynn. And in some ways, I think we talk about him being loyal to Michael Flynn, and it's probably, and he said this before when he's been asked, why were you so loyal, or why didn't you fire him over that 18-day period? And some of his answers have been, well, he was a general, right? And we know that Donald Trump reveres the military. He talks about General Patton as being one of the people he idolizes. He talks about generals, the people in his administration.
Yes, Nia.
And so I think that's part of it too. There's something in Donald Trump's view, it seems to be, that's inherently good, inherently worth defending if you've got the label general.
But this particular general, David Gergen, as so many people have pointed out here, was a general who did the locker up. He was a birther. He had so many things that were just untoward that people thought were just not beyond, but just below of what even a civilian should say, or behavior from a civilian rather than a general. It makes one wonder why this president stood behind him and had so much respect for him or loyalty for him.
Totally agree. But can we get one factual question settled? I'd be Matthew or Jeff Toobin. This grand jury that has subpoenaed Michael Flynn's records and that sort of thing, that grand jury is in Northern Virginia. Does that grand jury now fall under Mueller? And is Mueller then the overall person in charge, or is that something separate?
Laura, or
well, I think the answer will be Mueller will have to make that choice. He will undoubtedly, as part of his information gathering process, learn of what that grand jury is doing and then decide whether he wants to take that over. Matthew, would you say that's right?
That seems right. I mean, we don't know for sure.
Well,
and obviously just got appointed, but it's going to have to.
But but somebody else in the Justice Department otherwise has to make a decision on whether to prosecute or whatever to do with Flynn out of Northern Virginia.
Well, let me weigh in here, fellas.
Let
me weigh in if I could. Interestingly enough, the person who oversees the Eastern District of Virginia, the northern you're talking about, is Dana Bente, who you remember replaced Sally Yates when she was fired by the Trump administration for refusing to implement or try to enforce and defend the travel ban. So you've got an interesting link that's connected right there. But remember, as special counsel now and special prosecutor, Robert Mueller has the advantage of being able to decide when and who he'd like to tell at the DOJ about his findings and his investigations. He has the prerogative to withhold information or to be forthcoming as it serves the investigation. What's happening with Flynn, would fall under the scope of the overall investigation as his marching orders are dictated by Rod Rosenstein at this point. So it will be all-encompassing, but he will have the opportunity that others did not have, which is to be silent. And of course, he could, since he's been under the direction of Rosenstein can overrule his statements or overrule his decisions, but he's got to go to Congress and let him know that. So he's got a really big advantage through EDVA and through his own marching orders.
So, Nia, here's a question then. We've had Matthews reporting in the New York Times. We got the McClatchy reporting, and then have you heard Nia, Jim Acosta's reporting about what was happening as this came down, where he said that they were saying that it takes a lot of the politics away. They were sort of saying that it was a sense of unity in the room. We're all in this together, but it takes a lot of the politics away. If you look at all of this reporting that has happened since then, and it takes none of the politics out of this.
No, and it certainly doesn't take the spotlight off of this at all. And initially, you imagine that was what Donald Trump wanted to do. He felt like if he could get Comey out, out of the picture, that somehow he would be in a better position. And of course, the White House finding out tonight the hard way that they're probably in a worse off position than they were when Comey was the head of the FBI with this special counsel now in place. And so this idea now that the White House and those White House aides who are overworked and have in many ways been thrown under the bus by their boss, they sort of have no choice but to say we're all in this together because they might be implicated in some of this, right? I mean, when you got this special counsel who can subpoena anything and can figure out what these aides knew and when they knew it, and if there's text messages or emails, they might have to lawyer up in the way that the president at some point might have to lawyer up too. So, this kind of moment they had tonight, a kind of esprit de corps, once the questions start coming at them, I imagine they're going to feel very differently.
I think Nia makes a very, very real point here. You're talking about real human beings, whether you like the Trump administration or not, and many of them are not very wealthy. And, if you have to hire a white-collar crime lawyer because you've been subpoenaed to the grand jury, even though you are not a suspect, you haven't done anything wrong, you're probably talking about $20,000 just to show up with you at the grand jury. It's a lot of money.
The president's a billionaire, though. He can.
Well, no, he can afford it. I have
he
no doubt.
He may be able to help them out. At least that's what we don't know. We haven't seen his tax return.
I wouldn't hold my breath.
Let me say this. If I could, let's say this, you guys. Let me just add. Nia, you're absolutely right that the president is in an exponentially worse off state than he was prior to having a special counsel. When Jim Comey was in office, remember, he was essentially an at-will employee. Even in his letter where he sent back to his staff and revered colleagues, he talked about the president could fire me for any reason or no reason at all. Well, there are protections in place now for Robert Mueller. And those protections are in place. If he were to be fired, it has to be from a personal action of the acting Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. If Rod Rosenstein, of course, he can be fired by President Trump, but it's got to be good cause. There are actual now protections in place to say you don't have that at-will status. And there can be congressional hearings and investigations into whether or not the firing itself of either of those individuals would be good cause. Yeah. This has set up a battle that he is put in a immeasurably worse off state.
Who was that, Matthew or David, who wanted to get in? Go ahead, Matthew.
I actually have a question for David and Jeffrey and anybody else. How did the Clinton staffers, when they had a special prosecutor, how did they pay for their legal fees? I'm kind of curious. It hadn't occurred to me just now because the Trump staffers are going to be facing a lot of, tens of thousands of dollars in fees.
George Stephanopoulos wrote about this in his book, All Too Human. He was, he was barely 30 years old in those days. And some of these people went into hock. They borrowed money. Some lawyers wanted to do it because it was a high-profile assignment. But, they borrowed money from their parents, some of them. It was they scraped money together.
But isn't that the reason for that, that famous quote from Hillary Clinton? Hang on, David, that famous quote from Hillary Clinton where she says, we were dead broke when we left the White House. They were broke because of the legal fees.
Correct. And for them, it wasn't $50,000. It was $5 million that they owed to Williams and Connolly.
Yeah, Matthew, what else you got? You've been here. There's got to be something breaking. You've been here for about 20 minutes. You got anything else?
I did have a thought. I did have a thought amid all this, is that you've got the special counsel now, but there's still a ton of, I guess, I don't want to call it investigations, but say intelligence collection going on. Remember, this investigation involved things on the other side of the world. And those kind of apparatuses, those agencies are still controlled by the White House, by Trump appointees. Mm-hmm. So, I think the White House, I imagine, has to understand they do still have a lot of authority in this country. Yeah. And that this is hardly something that they're powerless over. And look, we've seen no evidence yet of politicization of saying anybody at the CIA saying don't collect on Russia, don't look at this. But, we don't know that to be the case entirely. And it's certainly something we'll be looking out for.
All right. Thank you all. When you want to be president of the United States, careful what you ask for.